given time, there should be at least one group that targets a device on the network. So in the most basic form, that's typically an IP group. So someone comes on the network, we give them an IP address, and that IP address falls into one of our address objects on the RxG, and then those address objects get linked to a particular IP group. So when you have a device that comes on the network and they have not done anything else yet, they're going to fall into an IP group that we've created. And that IP group has its own policy tied to it. Most of the time that policy is fairly simple, it just has a splash portal enforcement. So the person gets on the network, their browser can't go out to the internet until they complete the captive portal login process. There are also the possibility to do MAC groups if you need to target specific devices on the network, or even specific types of devices based on their OUI, that sort of thing. But then there's also the ability to have higher level groups, so not necessarily like based on the IP MAC address stuff, but based on the information that we gather from the person through the captive portal. So that's really the beginning of the person's journey in most cases, is having an experience change based on the credentials that you enter into the captive portal. That may just be as simple as entering a shared credential. It might even be that they don't even need to know the shared credential, they're just clicking a button that gives them free access to the network, and then they move into a shared credential group. It may be something where they log in with some type of credential, their Active Directory credentials, for example, Radius credentials, or maybe they're signing up for an account in the RxG. So a lot of different ways that can happen. But the goal is to get those people into a group that we have a targeted experience for. That's really the big thing, is being able to control the experience of the user and tailor that to the specifics of our network and our needs. So, as I mentioned, we've got just kind of the static, a particular IP range or a particular group of MAC addresses, pretty basic. And in this diagram, we just have our training IP group, for example, linking into a policy that's got a splash portal enforcement. If you have devices that, if you're in, say, an office environment, you may not want to have all of your devices going through a captive portal process. You might just need to have, certain devices that it's a more traditional network where they just connect to the network, they get an IP address, DNS, they can go out to the internet. We have the ability to just go in and create an IP group that has that particular policy set up in it. Things start to get more interesting though once you do have that captive portal and we have the ability to change the identity of the user based on the information that they're entering in. So I mentioned before shared credential groups. It's just a simple way to get people access, and maybe there's just a code that's, say, given out at the front desk or something. People will go in, enter that code, they have a session created for them, they're able to do what they want, and then when that session ends, they go back into their original group. It could be an account group, and that they can get into an account group in a few ways. Maybe there are some circumstances where you've got pre-created accounts and people have their credentials and they can just enter their credentials to get in. But most of the time in the networks that end up getting deployed using an RxG, the idea is that we want to have basically no operator intervention and no real need to have, create things manually ahead of time, create those accounts. We want people to go in, sign up for their own account, and be able to control the experience based on the options that we've set in the configuration that are available to them. So So as I mentioned, there's also the ability to tie that in with external systems if you've got a LDAP, rated server, things like that. Another big aspect of that is property management systems. So the hospitality industry is a big segment of our users, and being able to enter in your PMS credentials into the portal and have your experience changed based on the result of that, tie in with billing in your property management system, so post charges to the room, things like that, and be able to really tie in with that system seamlessly and allow us to change the user's experience once they've identified themselves as a guest in that system. So in this graph here, we've just got our post login policies. So basically once we've elevated the person beyond their IP or MAC group, they've gone through the portal, and now we have some other way to identify that user. We've got our post-login policy, which has different types of enforcement. And this is a pretty basic graph again. There's not a whole lot going on here. But again, you can just see we've got some traffic shaping happening here. And this graph kind of will describe the entire user experience in one visual thing. And this is available just automatically generated as you build out your policy in the RxG. So being able to visualize things in this way really helps a lot to be able to just kind of know what's going on in the network at one glance and see exactly what's happening.